Hello, hockey fans, and we have reached the fourth and final part of our series looking at the career of the great Ron Francis. If you haven't seen the first three videos, two of which looking at his days in Hartford, and our last video, which was a long and extensive look at his days in Pittsburgh, check them out right now as the links are in the description. But to give a brief summary, after being the big fish in a small pond in Hartford for 10 years, he found great success during 8 seasons, 7 of them full seasons in Pittsburgh, winning 2 Stanley Cups plus finally winning some individual lead accolades. The Selke Trophy as the league's best defensive forward. He won 2 Lady Byng trophies for sportsmanship and excellence, and he led the league in assists twice. He's in the top 10 in that category for 6 straight seasons, and was one of the top 10 points leaders for 4 straight seasons, including his last season there, where we left off in 1997-98. He now has over 1,000 career points, became the 7th player in NHL history to reach 1,000 assists, and he has now thrived on both being the big fish in a small pond, and now also being the big fish among a spawn of, well, other big fish, so to speak. But anyway, I digress. But indeed, the Penguins thought his time was up, and at the age of 35, after 17 NHL seasons, he still felt he had a lot to offer. So he signed a very lucrative deal with the Carolina Hurricanes for 4 years worth over $20 million. The team once known as the Hartford Whalers. Ron is ready to enter his 18th NHL season, his first as a Hurricane. He is up to a whole new task. After years of being a quiet star, his name is now just a little more familiar. He's not just the big fish in a small pond again, he's a big shark in charge of a kingdom, pretty much. Ron Francis' time in Pittsburgh, despite being overshadowed in many ways by Lemieux and Jagr, made him a bit more of a household name. In Carolina, a region known for popularity of college sports, hockey wasn't a household name, but Ron Francis' arrival saw an increase in season ticket sales, and his jersey was a huge seller. When he was drafted by Hartford, he was entering a basement team trying to find itself and tried to build around him. And while the team had minor success, it didn't quite pan out all the way. And indeed, in Pittsburgh, he was taken by a team that simply needed one more puzzle piece to win it all on a team that was already pretty stacked. And he indeed was it. In Carolina, he's brought in to bring leadership, guidance, veteran depth to a team that sorely needs it. Since he's left Hartford, they made the playoffs the year he left in 91, and again in 92. They haven't made it since, including their first year in Carolina, which was 1997-98, the year prior. General Manager Jim Rutherford had years of damage to undo, dating back to when Ron still played for them. The team's head coach was Paul Maurice. He had at least given the team a bit of life and breathed some, well, shall we say, direction into many of the players. And they were in the very depressing Southeast Division. Oh, and the Hurricanes at this point? Well, they were led by Captain Keith Primo, who'd been a star in Detroit. Also, they had Finnish imports Sami Kapanen, another former Red Wings star, and Ray Shepard, who had multiple 30-goal seasons under his belt, including reaching the 50-goal mark once. You had veteran gritty power forward Gary Roberts, sophomore Jeff O'Neill. They had veteran Martin Jelena to provide depth if this team ever makes the playoffs. And speaking of depth, they had the likes of Robert Cron, Bates Battaglia, Nelson Emerson, Paul Ranheim, and someone Ron is very familiar with, Kevin Dineen. Their defense was led by veteran Glenn Wesley, that also included veterans such as Steve Chasson, Curtis Lashishin, Sean Hill, and Nolan Pratt. And in net, the Latvian sensation Arturs Urbe and his reliable backup Trevor Kidd. The talent is there, but is Ron the missing piece that they need to bring it all together? The Hurricanes are one of the worst scoring teams in the league. Could they be on the road to somewhere better with Ron? Well, let's find out. Well, Ron also had to wear the number 21 because Gary Roberts was wearing number 10, so you're probably thinking, well, Ron bitched and complained until he got his number back. Well, wait, he didn't? Oh, that's right, Ron Francis played in a time where athletes were more concerned about winning. Okay, gotcha. He knew Roberts was in Carolina first and had also worn the number 10 for many years. And on October 10th, 1998, he made his debut with the Hurricanes at home, had a goal and assist in a tie against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and his first goal as a Hurricane was assisted by the man he had great chemistry with many moons ago in Hartford, Kevin Dineen. Very fitting. His offensive production, however, was slow otherwise, as he had 6 points in his first 10 games. But the Hurricanes as a whole were looking pretty decent early on. However, in November, Ron had one of the worst months of his career. 3 goals and assists for 4 points in 14 games, and was a pretty bad -6. Hurricanes were still playing somewhat so-so, but even in this dead puck era, this was way below par for our hero. December was also a slow month. 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points, and a -3. Even defensively, Ron was not playing all that great. The Canes also made a big acquisition at the time, however, Ron's former Pittsburgh teammate, future Hall of Fame defenseman, Paul Coffey. Ron only had 15 points going into the new year, but in January he was looking a lot more like himself. In 14 games, he had 2 goals and 8 assists for 10 points, and seemed to be recapturing his defensive game. On January 7th, he returned to Pittsburgh for the very first time since departing the team and got a tremendous ovation for the fans in the Igloo. 1 week later, he had 3 assists in a win over the Florida Panthers, and 4 days later against the revamped Toronto Maple Leafs club, he repeated that performance. The Hurricanes were looking pretty good. In February, he was continuing to play very well as the Hurricanes looked like they had the playoffs in their sights. 12 points in 13 games, a +2, and a monster 5 points against the Leafs on the road on February 10th. 2 goals, 3 assists, and it was also a +3 that game. The Canes were staying the course in a good way. They had some struggles in March, however, but Ron was playing pretty well still. 6 goals and 3 assists for 9 points in 13 games, including 2 goals on March 15th against the Phoenix Coyotes, who were formerly known as the Winnipeg Jets when Ron first started in the league. They picked things up in the final stretch, and Ron was playing with that trademark Warrior heart. 7 points in 7 games and a huge +6, including 2 goals on April 14th against a familiar foe in the Washington Capitals. The Hurricanes finished 34, 30, and 18 for 86 points. Their first winning season since 1989-90 in Hartford. That was Ron's last full year there. And for the first time since 1992, they are heading to the playoffs, and get this, they won their first division title since 1986-87. Who was a major part of that, you ask? Oh, if you watch the other videos, you know. It was Ron. And he was part of that big division win. This also gives them the 3rd spot in the Eastern Conference. Ron was about to make his 14th consecutive postseason appearance, and his time in Pittsburgh gave him deep playoff experience, and awaiting them was a team he had encountered quite often in his last days in Hartford and during his Stanley Cup days in Pittsburgh, the Boston Bruins. The Bruins finished 39, 30, and 11 for 89 points, and one man remained from those clubs that Ron encountered, team captain and future Hall of Fame defenseman Ray Bourque. In his 20th season, looking for that first Stanley Cup and still playing some of the best hockey of his career. Surrounding him on the blue line were the likes of Darren Van Impe, Kyle McLaren, Don Sweeney, Hal Gill, and veteran all-star Dave Ellett. Up front, they were led by Jason Allison, Sergei Samsonov, Steve Hines, and the hard-working Anson Carter, as well as Dmitry Kristich and a youngster by the name of Joe Thornton. And character players such as PJ Axelson and Tim Taylor also helped this team provide depth. In net, they were backstopped by the talented Byron Dafoe and coached by the man known as Burnsy. Here we go, Game 1, Greensboro Coliseum, the house the Horsemen built. The Bruins' defense is on point. Our hero and his team have no answer. They are shut out 2-0. And Ron, who played all 82 regular season games, suffers a mild ankle sprain. This is not good. Game 2, the Canes surge forward and take Game 2 thanks to an overtime winner from Ray Shepard. The series is tied as we head to Beantown. Game 3, the Boston faithful is rabid as always. However, Urbe is superb in net. And a tie-breaking goal from Cron early in the 3rd period is all the Hurricanes need, and they take a series lead 2-1. Game 4, however, the Canes are outplayed in every facet of the game and lose 4-1, and the series is tied at 2-2 heading back to Greensboro. Game 5, however, good news. Our hero is back, and if he's hurt, he's hiding it quite well. He's showing that playoff tenacity he was always loved for in Pittsburgh. But it's looking bleak as time is winding down. However, the veteran duo of Ronnie and Gary, they set up Sammy Kapanen. He scores. With 1:45 to play, the place erupts as we're headed to OT. Urbe is red hot in net, and the Bruins defense aren't giving the Canes much. And the first OT ends with no decision. In the second overtime, with 5:15 to go, Carter sinks the Hurricanes' hopes, and the Bruins now have our hero and his boys on the verge of elimination, heading home. Game 6, the Canes firing on Dafoe. Ron has 2 shots himself, but Dafoe stops those, and the other 29 he faced. The Bruins win 2-0 and take this series in 6 games. Ron was injured early in Game 1, but he returned looking pretty good. Game 5, despite the loss, but either way, the Hurricanes are still a growing club, and his absence or presence likely would have seen the same result. The Bruins, however, will go on to lose the eventual Eastern Conference champions Buffalo in 6 games in the next round. Also, in a very tragic turn of events, the very next day, after the Hurricane season ended, defenseman Steve Chasson was tragically killed in a car accident at age 32. Ron Francis had 21 goals and 31 assists for 52 points, not counting the strike-shortened year in 1994-95. Those were career lows across the board. And even some of those numbers that season weren't even as good as the 95 season. However, he still found great chemistry with Sammy Kapanen, as together they worked to produce 25 goals one way or another, accounting for nearly half of Ron's points. Kapanen assisted on nearly half of Ron's goals of 21 with 10 helpers. Ron returned the favor with the same amount, assisting on 10 of Sammy's 24 goals that year. They also teamed up for 5 assists in that regard. Ron also teamed up with 5 helpers with Gary Roberts, who he developed great chemistry with. And yes, indeed, Ron's career lows across the board in terms of full 80-game seasons, as he had the worst first half of the season he had in his entire career. His 21 goals tied his career low in 1991-92, which was his worst offensive year, that being his first full season with the Pens. It seemed Carolina's lack of scoring prowess was hurting him in a big way, and didn't seem to have the support he had in Pittsburgh or even some days in Hartford. His 31 assists and 52 points, he had better marks in the 48-game strike shortened season in 1995, and those were both beating career lows set in 1991-92. He is also a -2. That's the first time since 1993-94 he finished in the minus. And for the first time also since the 91-92 season, he didn't register any votes for any awards. His 4-season streak of finishing in the top 10 in league points comes to an end, as does his big 6-season streak of being among the top 10 in assists also comes to an end. But in the second half of the season, he was more himself. He was the Canes' leading scorer in the final 41 games of the year, helping them clinch their first playoff spot since their days in Hartford in 1992, and their first winning season since 1989-90, which again was his last full year in Hartford, and their first division title since 1986-87, which, again, he was a monster part of. And despite his playoff injury, hope for Ron turning this Hurricanes team around was pretty much at a high. Despite the tragic loss of their teammate Steve Chasson, the Hurricanes were set to move forward, and Ron, in just a second season with the club going into 1998-2000, was bestowed the captaincy as Keith Primo was headed to Philadelphia. It was pretty much a unanimous choice. The hopes of this team gaining any prominence was going to be on his shoulders, but pressure was something that he'd always welcomed. The Hurricanes were a growing club, and they were going to continue to mature. Despite his rough start in Carolina, he came alive when it mattered most, and was ready to carry that momentum into this season. He started the year on a tear, 3 goals, 10 assists for 13 points, 11 games. He was a huge +11. He had 3 assists in another homecoming to Pittsburgh on October 23rd, and the Hurricanes were off to a decent start. November, Ron slowed down just a little bit, but still had a decent 7 points in 12 games, and the team was, well, just simply so-so at this point. But the team started to fall apart in December, just winning 3 games all month. While Ron did have 11 points in 12 games, he was a -8. The team just couldn't get on the same wavelength. In January, the team continued to struggle immensely, in hopes of getting back to the playoffs were fading. Ron had another 12 points in 13 games that month. However, in February, Ron knuckled down even a little bit more and helped get the Hurricanes back on winning track. His defensive game was back to what it was during his Selke days. Matt Sundin couldn't escape our hero at all, and Ron got 2 goals in a February 14th win over the Leafs. He also took time to educate young Vinny LeCavier of the Lightning. Our hero was determined to get Carolina into the playoffs and was sensational in March. 5 goals, 14 assists for 19 points in 15 games. 1 goal and 2 assists for 3 points over the Coyotes. 2 goals against the Sharks a few days later. And plus 4 other 2-point games as well. With 4 games to go, the playoffs looked like a possibility. And also the addition of former Flyers All-Star Rod Brind'Amour seemed to help the club a great deal. The Hurricanes were tied with the Habs, the final spot in the Eastern Conference. With 4 games to go and 2 against the dead last Thrashers to end the season, it looked almost like a sure thing. On April 2nd, they faced the Flyers. It was the Arturs Urbe show. He stopped 31 shots, and a goal from Bates Battaglia was all he needed to win at 1-0. The Canes move into sole possession of 8th in the East, as the Habs lost to the Sabres the night before, and then suffered an overtime loss against the Red Wings on this day. So now the Sabres and Habs were the teams to worry about, just 1 point behind Carolina. Ron headed back to his old home in Pittsburgh, as the Pens were, well, they're trying to secure their spot for the playoffs. It was a heartbreaking 3-2 loss for the Canes. And bad news, Buffalo beats Toronto that day. Now Carolina slips to 9th, with Buffalo at 81 points to Carolina's 80. And it gets worse. Buffalo gets a win and loses in OT, and now have 84 points. The only way the Hurricanes can get in is if they win both games against the Thrashers, which should be easy, but Buffalo has to suffer at least a regulation loss to Washington. And indeed, the Hurricanes beat the Thrashers by scores of 4-3 on the road and 2-1 at home. In the road battle, Francis had 2 assists and got another helper in the final game of the season. But the Sabres obtain a tie, and the Hurricanes will miss the playoffs. Ron had a very impressive season this year, 23 goals and 50 assists for 73 points in 78 games. And a very mixed bag for Ron this year. He clicked with a lot of people. Once again, Gary Roberts made his presence felt, assisting on 7 of Ron's goals, and Ron assisted on 13 of 24 Kapanen goals. And he collaborated with underrated defenseman Sean Hill 8 times for assists. Also, he clicked well with Jeff O'Neill, Bates Battaglia, and fellow legend and former Penguins teammate Paul Coffey. For the 11th time in his career, Ron Francis was among the top 10 leaders in assists, finishing 10th with 50 on the year. And hey, look at this, Ron was also back in the thick of things with awards voting, coming in 9th place for the Lady Byng Trophy with 50 votes. And he also garnered some votes for the Selke Trophy as his defensive skills were once again recognized. 12th place, 28 votes. Much like his second year in Pittsburgh, his second year in Carolina saw him come back to complete form. And he did all he could to try to lead the Hurricanes to the next level, but he couldn't quite get there. He did finish a +10 and was recognized in votes for awards he has often contended for. But he was also named team captain and was winning the hearts of fans and people in the community of Raleigh, North Carolina, where the team had moved to that year. They appreciated his hard work ethic and leadership. This would be the first time Ron would miss the playoffs since 1985, and only for the 5th time in his entire career. One of the things that people always admired about Ron Francis throughout his entire career was his ability to stay healthy and consistent. And indeed, 2000-2001 will be his 20th season in the NHL. When Ron was a rookie in 1981-82, there were 21 teams in the league. In 91-92, they added a 22nd. 2 years later, there were 26 teams in the league. Minnesota had moved to Dallas, Quebec would move to Colorado, and Winnipeg moved to Phoenix. And of course, Hartford moved to Carolina. By 2000, the NHL expanded to 28 teams, and now the Blue Jackets and the Minnesota Wild entering the league, the NHL was now 30 teams strong. The game had changed, and the era where Ron played saw even the worst teams have 40 goal scorers or players approaching 100 points, with the 20th leading scorer in the league usually hovering around 90 points or even a little more. These days, in the era of the 21st century, 90 points would almost guarantee you a spot in the top 10. Ron had seen a lot of change, but his tremendous attitude towards the game he loved stayed the same. The Hurricanes underwent some changes. Gary Roberts was off to Toronto. Paul Coffey went to Boston. They were hoping to get something out of prospect Shane Willis and made a big acquisition acquiring Colorado Avalanche star Sandis Ozolinsh for their defense. And also adding depth to defense, someone Ron knew from Pittsburgh, 15-year veteran Kevin Hatcher. The Canes were focused on hoping to build further this season. Captain Ron was now once again wearing the familiar number 10. The season did not start well. Ron has 7 points in 11 games, which isn't too bad. Most of which came in a 2-goal, 1-assist performance for 3 points on Halloween against Tampa Bay. The Canes only won 3 games all month. Fortunes improved for them, however, in November, but defensively Ron was suffering a bit. He had 10 points in 13 games, but was a -8. He had the same point total the next month in 12 games, and was again playing more like himself overall, even though the Canes couldn't get on a hot streak. In January, Ron was back through and through, and the rest of the team responded. A 2-goal game against Anaheim on the 14th, and 3 assists against Tampa to end the month. The month that saw Ron score 5 goals, 11 assists for 16 points in 14 games, and was a +5, and he was finally guiding this team on a better path this year. February was not kind to Ron, however, averaging just a half a point a game and was a -4. Then Ron had 12 points in 15 games and looked very good in March, including a 3-assist game and a win over Pittsburgh, where he went into the face-off circle against Mario Lemieux, who had come out of retirement that year. Going into the final stretch of games this season, the Hurricanes were a point out of a playoff spot behind the Boston Bruins, and 5 games remaining while the Bruins had 4 to go. It wasn't going to come easy, as the high-powered Senators had one of the best years in franchise history awaited them. It was a shocking overtime win for the Hurricanes after a Shane Willis goal as our hero was just killing Alexei Yashin in the faceoff circle, but the Bruins beat the Habs next day and were still up on the Canes by a point. The schedule got a little bit more difficult as a stacked St. Louis Blues team faced them on April 3rd. They had to settle for a tie, but having more wins, they move into the 8th spot, despite having the same point total as Boston at 84. Things get a little easier for our hero and the Hurricanes, taking on a pathetic Rangers club. Ron assisted on the empty netter in a 3-1 win, moving to 86 points, but the Bruins won that day too, but they're still holding on to 8th place. Then it's the Thrashers. On April 6th, Ron scores a huge goal in the second period to tie the game 1-1 and assists on a Battaglia goal, giving them a 2-1 lead. The Thrashers tied it, but Martin Jelena scores the game winner, and the Bruins lose the Devils. The Carolina Hurricanes are going back to the playoffs. The team finished 38-32, 9-3. It was the first time in franchise history, dating back to the days in Hartford, that they had 3 consecutive winning record seasons. And awaiting them in the opening round was the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Dukes of the Dead Puck era, the New Jersey Devils. The Devils were the beasts of the East, finishing with a monster 111 points, and now coached by Hall of Fame defenseman Larry Robinson. He's still using the system that has been key to this era in hockey. An amazing defense led by Captain Scott Stevens, who's now in his 19th season but still playing some of the best and most aggressive hockey of his career. Joining him, of course, was Scott Niedermayer, and he also had the talented Brian Rafalski, tough Colin White, and veteran fan favorite Ken Danico. And backstopping it all, of course, was one of the best in the game at net, Martin Brodeur. Up front, however, talent was still there. He had 40 goal scorer Patrick Iliash, Russian sensation veteran Alexander Mogilny, two-way specialist Peter Sikora, and the reliable Jason Arnott, former Harvard alum of Ron's Bobby Holik, also defensive forward John Madden, Sergei Brelin, Randy McKay, and Sergei Nemchinov. Here we go, Game 1, it's the Garden State, and it's a rough outing, and our hero and the gang has very little going for them. They are down at 5-1. Game 2, the Devils' defense is just too much for our hero and the Canes. They lose 2-0 and trail the series by the same. Game 3, this series shifts to Raleigh, and the Canes' faithful has faith, but the faith has turned to silence early on. Our hero takes a devastating hit from Scott Stevens, who else? And he is motionless. Ron's night is over and his prognosis is not good, and to top it off, the Devils get a 4-0 winner on the verge of committing a sweep. Game 4, our hero is on the sidelines, and another veteran, Rod Brindamore, however, steps up his game with a 3-point night, including the OT winner. The Canes aren't quitting. Game 5 in New Jersey, a monster team effort from Carolina. They are fighting for a comeback and force a Game 6. And back home, the fans are rabid, but the storm is calmed. The Devils win 5-1 and take the series in 6. Once again, like 1999, Ron doesn't really get a chance to shine as he misses half the series, and again, the Carolina Hurricane season ends in heartbreak, and sadly, our hero was a non-factor in the games he played. The Devils went all the way to the Stanley Cup final for the second straight year, only to lose to the Colorado Avalanche. It wasn't Ron's most banner year, as for the first time in his 20-season career, again, not counting the 1994-95 strike-shortened season, he failed to reach 20 goals. He only had 15 goals, but still had an excellent 50 assists, for a total of 65 points playing in all 82 games. Not too bad. His guys were, to no surprise, Jeff O'Neill and once again Sami Kapanen. All but 3 of Ron's goals were assisted by these two, each having 6. He assisted on 21 of O'Neill's career-high 41 goals, just above half, while he and Sami collaborated on 11 assists. In total, he and O'Neill teamed up one way or another for 35 goals, while he and Kapanen worked together to produce 29. He also had good chemistry with prospect Shane Willis, as well as defenders Dave Tanabe and Sandy Zozelinch. Ron registered a singular vote for the Selke Trophy, coming in tied at 43rd. He notched a very impressive 81 votes, however, for the Lady Byng Trophy, coming in 7th place for an award he has won twice. Yeah, wasn't overly a memorable year for Ron, but it still had its moments, and again, reaching 50 assists is nothing to sneeze at. However, his minus 15 was the worst mark in the stats since his early days in Hartford. However, this is the first time this franchise has had 3 straight winning records. Francis is still seen as the leader and guide to his teammates, especially the younger talents. And while some naysayers were saying he was done, they were in for a bit of a surprise. Ron clearly wants to see the growth of this Hurricanes team through and through. He clearly came back to help mold a winner, and he wanted to lead the way. He believed in this team, and they in turn believed in him. Ron may have been getting older, and while his stats may have fallen, his work ethic certainly hadn't. And he was also playing in an era where players who dominated the score sheet weren't exactly racking up the numbers they used to in the first place. Ron also wants to bring a Stanley Cup to Carolina, and while the fan base might not be as large as some other teams, much like Hartford, the loyal ones are there. And also much like Hartford, they believe in their captain going into the 2001-02 season. And our hero was an ageless wonder out there. 3 goals, 12 assists for 15 points to start the season, including a 3-assist effort against the Thrashers, and a monster 4-point night, 2 goals and 2 helpers against the Minnesota Wild later in the month. And as for his opposing centers, be it veteran Mike Modano of the Stars or rookie Ilya Kovalchuk of the Thrashers, Ron had their number. The Canes, however, were off to just an okay start. They had trouble finding consistency, and Ron himself didn't have an overly stellar month either in November with a goal and 6 assists for 7 points in 16 games in a month that included a 7-game scoring slump. But in December, Ronnie franchise was living up to his name. 8 each. Goals and helpers, 16 points in 14 games, including a 2-goal and an assist effort for 3 points against his former team. The Penguins continue to shine against them, and he replicated that feat on New Year's Eve against the Sabres. The Hurricanes were on a tear, and their fearless leader was sailing. But little did they know, Ron was sailing to another milestone, and again, much like the others he reached, did it pretty quietly. On January 2nd, 2002, the Hurricanes were hosting a much improved Boston Bruins team. A team, of course, Ron, like I mentioned, was very familiar with immensely from being in the same division as this club during his 10 seasons in Hartford, not to mention the playoff rivalry the Penguins had with them during their Stanley Cup years. Ron had scored a fair share of goals against this club. The Canes were off to a terrible start in the game, trailing 3-0 before the halfway mark of the first period. But on a power play, Sami Kapanen took control of an extra man advantage, getting the puck to Eric Cole. Ron put himself in the right position, as he often does on this extra man advantage and throughout his career, and parked the puck past Byron Defoe. This was career goal number 500 for Ron Francis. Ron became the 29th player in NHL history to reach the mark, and some have even said, no way he's scored 500 goals, he's never even reached 40 in a season. Well, yes, hence why he's the first player in NHL history to reach the mark without scoring at least 40 goals in a single season. Just over 20 years since November 18, 1981, when he scored his first goal on Vincent Tremblay of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Ronnie franchise was part of yet another elite club, the 500 Goal Club, and again, did so almost under the radar. Francis had a decent January aside from that as well, with 13 points in 14 games, including a goal and 3 assists for 4 points against the Canucks. In February, Ron had 7 points in 6 games, and not long before the Olympic break, had 2 goals against the Ducks, and another huge 4-point night against the Bruins to end the month. The Hurricanes just ripped through the competition in March. Indeed, our hero was leading the way. 6 goals, 7 assists, 13 points in 12 games, and a +5. Back-to-back 2-goal games against Pittsburgh and Washington. 4 goals in 2 games. And he was a lion up there as ferocious as ever. 39, playing like he was 29. He went toe-to-toe with the pest Jeremy Roenick, now with the Flyers, and while facing the Habs, he showed no fear against another defensive forward specialist, fellow veteran Doug Gilmour. Hey, and he also had no problem putting young Scott Gomez of the Devils in his place, and to top it off, the Hurricanes are back in the playoffs, and with 7 games to go, had a 6-point lead on the Capitals for the division title. Ron was trying to show the world not only what he could do, but what his team is capable of, which is why during some recent games in Raleigh, chants of MVP were directed at Ron Francis. To begin the month, Ron had a 3-assist game in a loss against Ottawa, which began a 3-game winless skid, sadly, which meant the Capitals could still catch them for first in the Southeast. However, they broke it with a tight win over the Islanders and a 4-2 win over Tampa Bay, which allowed them to reach 88 points and clinch the division in 3rd place overall in the Eastern Conference. Ron scored a key tie-breaking goal in the game to give the Hurricanes a 2-1 lead. He'll be a healthy scratch for the remaining 2 games of the year, a good move considering playoff injuries in recent years. The Hurricanes finished 35, 26, 16, and 5 for 91 points. The team has not had a losing season since Ron has arrived in 1998. But now it's playoff time, and oh dear, look who's awaiting them again, the New Jersey Devils, coming off back-to-back Stanley Cup final appearances. The Devils are indeed the team is intact, the one who faced Carolina last year, but they had some issues as Coach Larry Robinson was fired, and Ron's last coach in Pittsburgh, Kevin Constantine, had taken over. They also added 15-year veteran and future Hall of Famer Joe Nieuwendyk, fresh off an Olympic gold medal, I might add, and they helped to enhance their playoff savvy and finished with 95 points. Francis hadn't been a part of a playoff series win since 1996. The Hurricanes' last playoff series win was in 1986, and yes, that was in Hartford, and yes, Ron was a part of that. So here we go. Game 1 in Raleigh, the Canes' attendance was at the highest since their move to the city, and they are packed for this game. I hope their team can take out the beasts of the East, the New Jersey Devils. Urbe is sensational in net. In that first period, 2 goals, 122 apart, give the Canes a 2-0 lead. The Devils do get one back in the third, but the Hurricanes hang on for a 2-1 win. Game 2, it's a tight defensive game. Urbe gets some breathing room, but eventually the Devils get to him, and he is bombarded, and the Devils take a 1-0 lead early in the second. But then, those 2 words we love to hear so much in these playoffs, power play, and the guy we love to lead it, Ron Francis, who gets it to double B, Bates Battaglia, and then Eric Cole notches it home. The game is tied 1-1 after 2. And Brodeur and Urbe hold their teams in, and we're off to overtime. The time is winding down, but Double B gets the goal with 4:34 remaining in the first OT. The Hurricanes take a 2-0 series lead. Oh, man. We shift to the Garden State Game 3, and it's a rough one for our hero. And the Hurricanes, they lose 4-0, and the Devils' defense is unstoppable in that outing. Game 4, the Hurricanes play slightly better, but it's a little bit much of the same. The Devils win 3-1 to tie the series at 2. We're going back to Raleigh. Game 5, Kevin Weeks gets the start for the Devils, and the Canes are finally able to solve the Devils' defensive scheme. It's smothered Brodeur with many shots and chances, yet still trail 2-1 as time is winding down. The fans and our hero and his team can almost feel the heartbreak coming on. But when Holik takes a charging penalty, it's a power play. Captain Ron, steer that ship. Get it to Brenda Moore, who shows some love to Jeff O'Neill, who scores with 1:29 to play. The place erupts. We're off to overtime. And 8:16 and Josef Vasicek is the hero. The Hurricanes are one game away from winning this series. Back to New Jersey, however, for Game 6, Kevin Weeks is amazing in net. The Devils can't get anything past him, and halfway through the second period, power play, check. Kapanen, check. Yaroslav Sabota, check. He's going to lend a hand to Ronnie Franchise. He gets his first goal of the playoffs. The Canes can't build on their lead, but Weeks is standing on his head as some rushes and the clock is winding down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The Carolina Hurricanes win their first ever playoff series as the Hurricanes. The franchise's first series win in 16 years. Ron helped lead the way. Indeed, his leadership and warrior spirit were on display, and it wasn't a very high-scoring series. As a matter of fact, Ron's 3 points, including the series-winning goal, was actually tied with Svoboda and Battaglia for top points on the team. It was a monster team effort all around, however. This is the type of work ethic our hero inspired, and for him, his first playoff series win since 1996 when the Penguins defeated the Rangers. The Hurricanes have life in these playoffs, dethroning the dominant Devils. Awaiting them, oh boy, Ron's kryptonite in his playoff career, the Montreal Canadiens. This upstart Habs club finished 36-3-1-3 and 12 for 87 points and completely shocked the Boston Bruins in 7 games. This is their first playoff appearance since 1998 when they upset a Penguins team Ron was the captain of. This incarnation of the Habs was led by Captain Courageous Saku Koivu, who overcame a battle with cancer to return this season. They were loaded with character players such as Yannick Barreau, Richard Sednik, and Oleg Petrov, as well as 19-year veteran Doug Gilmour and former All-Star Joe Juneau. This Habs forward core worked together in a major cohesive fashion for them to fight to get this playoff spot, and their defense was pretty solid too, with seasoned vet Stefan Quintel, Montreal mainstay Patrice Brisebois, who was part of their cup-winning team in 1993, and rounding out, you had Craig Rivet and the promising Sheldon Sure, and also, yes, the talented and beloved Andrei Markov. But the man making the headlines was the young superstar goaltender Jose Theodore, the league MVP and Vezina Trophy winner. They were coached by Mitchell Therrien, and this Habs team looked ready to continue their miracle run. The Hurricanes/Whalers have never made it to the conference finals in their history. Ron has faced the Habs 4 times in the playoffs, and not once has he ever been able to beat them. Game 1 in Raleigh. Theodore and Weeks are amazing in net, and it's scoreless after 2 periods. But in the third period, it's Svoboda to Wallen to Ronnie. He scores. The Carolina Hurricanes strike first. Cole adds an insurance marker as time winds down. Another shutout for Weeks, and Ronnie has his second straight game-winning goal. He's coming up huge in the clutch. Carolina takes the first game. Game 2, Weeks is weak, and the Habs capitalize. Despite not getting many shots, they have a 3-0 lead. The second period winding down, but ooh, look at extra man advantage. Ronnie, take the wheel and pass it to Double B, who sets up Brenda Moore, who will shoot and score. The Canes are on the board, but it's not enough. The Habs go on to win 4-1, and the series is tied 1-1. Game 3, we ship to Montreal. The Habs faithful is rocking, and Theodore is turning back everything, and the game is tied 1-1 after regulation. Early in overtime, however, Donald Odette scores to give the Habs a 2-1 win and a 2-1 series lead. Game 4, however, Ron is leading with focus and ferocity, but it looks terrible, and the Habs lead 3-0 after 2. Looks like it's going to be the same old story, but on another early power play in the period, Semi to Ronnie to Hill. The Canes are on the board. There's still a lot of time, but Taglia gets a goal, and with 7:17 to play, The Hurricanes trail by a goal. Time is winding down. Carolina is fighting. Francis is playing like his youthful self, showing that age really is just a number when it comes to playoff hockey. And he's making the youngsters gasp for air. Battaglia fights for the puck and finds Ron, who ultimately sets up Cole for a goal. Poet and didn't know it. The game is tied. The Bell Center is silenced. We're off to overtime and 3:14 in. Wallen scores. The Canes win. And the series is tied. What a performance from our hero. He didn't give up. Neither did this team. We're going back to Raleigh. Game 5, it's Urbe's turn to shine in net. The Habs are firing in on him, but he's not giving up much, so the Hurricanes lead 2-0 after 2 periods. Power play. Shawnee to Roddy to Ronnie. He parks it home, rocking the Habs like a Hurricanes they are. The Canes now lead 3-0 and then go on to win 5-1. 1 win away from their first conference final appearance ever. Game 6, however, the Habs fans still have faith, but you can hear a pin drop soon enough. 5-0 Hurricanes in the first period. League MVP Jose Theodore is humiliated and his day is over. Our hero sets up Battaglia in the second period to make it 6-1 as the Bell Center fans file out a huge 8-2 win. The Carolina Hurricanes, for the first time, are going to the Eastern Conference Finals. Our hero, in a word, fantastic. His series-saving performance and tenacious effort in Game 4 to tie the series was the turning point, and now he's back in the Eastern Conference Final for the first time since 1992. And while he helped the Penguins get there in 96, if you recall, he was injured and missed that entire series. But can our hero bring the Canes to the promised land at long last? Oh boy, but it's not going to be easy because awaiting them, the Bay Street Bullies, the Toronto Maple Leafs. This aggressive and gritty Leafs team, led by the great Pat Quinn behind the bench, has been on the cusp of glory for quite some time since Quinn became their bench boss in 1998. Finishing with 100 points on the dot, this is their first conference final appearance since 1999. They're looking for their first cup appearance since they last won it in 1967. They're coming off 2 exhausting 7-game series wins over the Islanders and heated rivals Ottawa. They are led by one of the most talented forwards in the game at this point, Captain Matt Sundin. They had a working-class type team with forwards like Darcy Tucker and Ron's former teammate, former Hurricane that is, Gary Roberts, as well as veteran aggressor Shane Corson. However, they also have the pure skill and awesomeness of Alexander McGillney now. Also Michael Renberg, Robert Reichel, Travis Green, and of course the pest known as Ty Domi. Their defense was led by Brian McCabe, who had a great year, and the smart Thomas Caberlet. Also, veteran Jyrki Lume gives the team some depth on the blue line, and supporting players such as Wade Belak and Aki Berg lent a big hand. However, the big star was in net. He was a big reason for their success, the man simply known as Cujo, all-star sensation Curtis Joseph. The Canes are going in on underdogs, but their focus isn't shaken. Game 1, Hurricane Fever is bursting through Raleigh and the Carolinas. And however, Cujo is a killer in net. The Canes take a 2-1 loss as our hero has 6 shots on goal. Neither of them get by. Game 2 is a highly competitive affair, and the chase for the puck was intense with every shift. Ron playing like he wants to be a champion again, and it shows. The Canes look like they haven't won, leading 1-0, as Urbe and the Canes defense have been tremendous, but Gary Roberts rubs in the face of his former fans as he sets up Alan McCulley to tie it with just 8 seconds left in regulation. We're off to OT. However, Wallen again comes up in the clutch. The series is tied as we head to the 6th. Game 3, the long-suffering Leaf fans want the cup, and it shows, but our hero has something to say about that as Sami Kapanen sets him up for a goal, and the Canes lead 1-0 early, but the Leafs tie late in the second. Both goalies aren't facing much action as both teams' defenses are playing a huge game, while our hero swarms Sundin as best he can. We're off to overtime yet again, and 6 minutes in, Hennigan gets it to Ronnie, to O'Neill. It's a goal, the Canes win, and take this series lead both 2-1. Game 4, however, the Leafs defense plays very well, and they're firing on Urbe with a barrage of shots, and the Canes do lead 1-0 going into the third period, but midway through the third, Ronnie to Sammy, he scores 2-0 lead. Oh, the time is winding down. The Leafs are playing like an undisciplined, frustrated bunch, giving the Hurricanes a power play with little time remaining. Well, let our hero show you how stupid that is of a mistake to make. Hill is in control, Brindamore keeps it going, and Ronnie scores 3-0 with 2:25 remaining. The Hurricanes now take a 3-1 series lead and are 1 win away from going to the Stanley Cup for the very first time. Ron has been brilliant the last 2 games. Game 5, Raleigh is rocking like never before. They want to see it happen, and Cujo, however, makes sure it doesn't happen, as Darcy Tucker gets the only goal of the game, at least win 1-0 and force a Game 6. The Leaf fans believe Urbe and Cujo, however, are amazing in net as Game 6 commences in Toronto, and the game is scoreless in the third. But near the halfway point, O'Neill gives the Canes a 1-0 lead, but time is winding down. It's about to happen. 1 minute left to play. The Leafs are pressing, but the Canes are fighting to keep the lead, and with 22 seconds left, Sundin scores. Taking the wind of the Hurricanes' sails, the ACC goes crazy. We're up to overtime for the third time in the series, and 8:05 in. The Canes make it happen to Clutcher. Martin Jalina sends the Carolina Hurricanes to the Stanley Cup Final! Oh wow, our hero is going to get his third shot at the Cup. He's 2 for 2 so far. And while things may be different in Carolina than they were in Pittsburgh, Ron's spirit has not changed, and his will to win remains the same, as he's just one step away from doing what he came here to do. His performance in Games 3 and 4 put the Canes in the driver's seat once again. He seems to produce his best at the most important times. This is why Ron deserves more credit than he has gotten in his career. He breathed life into the stagnant Whalers in the 80s, when while they couldn't get past a certain point, he was the main reason for the team getting anywhere. He went to Pittsburgh and achieved some of the best success he ever had. Won accolades, didn't cruise on a team that was already stacked with talent. He produced more than ever and saw even more success than he had in Hartford. But 2 Stanley Cup rings now to show for it. You almost wish with this story going the way it was, the Hurricanes were still in Hartford being the Whalers, to watch the man who got them somewhere in the first place, after the franchise crumbled, come back and help them turn around to even bigger heights that they had never seen. They have the chance to be champions, something that even at the beginning of the year many thought not possible, but our hero was determined. But now the challenge was going to be one of the greatest single-season teams ever assembled, the league's best team, the Detroit Red Wings, and their 116 points. And yes, rest assured I'll be doing a video on that team in the near future. Their playoff trek, however, didn't come easy. It took them 6 games to beat the Canucks. They did overcome a pretty good St. Louis Blues team easily in 5 games, and won a grueling 7-game series with their nemesis, the defending Cup champion Colorado Avalanche, to get here. So yeah, let's take a look at this team, shall we? Let's see, we got Stevie Y, we got Shanny, they just won gold medals. Let's see, Sergei Fedorov, Brett Hull, Luke Robota, Igor Larionov. Okay, that's 6 Hall of Famers right there. And that's just our forwards. Defense, Nick Lidstrom, Chris Chelios, make that 2 more Hall of Famers. Oh, and net, Dominic Hasek, another Hall of Famer. Oh, but what about the guys who aren't Hall of Famers? Well, Pavel Datsyuk is likely to be one. He's in his rookie year here. Also, that infamous grinder line, Draper, McCarty, and Maltby, you want them on your team come playoff time. Throw in Thomas Holmstrom. Yeah, I'd say this team is pretty strong. Who joins the Hall of Famers on the blue line, do you ask? Oh, just guys who had awesome careers, like veteran Steve Duchesne, veteran Freddie Olsen, who played with Ron at Pittsburgh. Oh, Matthew Danino. Okay. Oh, their coach, someone else Ron knows well. Scotty Bowman, who coached Ron in his last Stanley Cup win in 1992. And indeed, the Wings won back-to-back Cups in 97, 98. Oh yeah, Bowman's a Hall of Famer too. And they want to get back to the top, however. But our hero and the Hurricanes were confident and are going to take this daunting task head on. Stanley Cup Finals 2002. Here we go. Game 1 at the Joe in Detroit. The Wings lead 1-0 after 1, but hoo-hoo boy, power play early in the second. Roddy in control, gets it to Sammy, who sets up Sean. It's a goal, the game is tied 1-1. They trade a goal each, and it's 2-2 after 2, and nobody scores in the third. We are off to overtime. The Canes have been a top-notch clutch team, and 58 seconds in, just like that, Kapanen O'Neill. Roddy franchise puts it past Hasek. The Hurricanes take game 1, a big upset. Our hero is the hero at the forefront. The naysayers now believe. What a game. His first overtime goal since that infamous game against the Rangers in 1992. Game 2, it's intense. The Hurricanes are doing all they can to take full control of the series heading home. It's tied 1-1 after 2 periods. As time is winding down with 5 to play, the Wings get one and get another 13 seconds later. Ron is sadly on ice for both of those. It's a heartbreaking 3-1 loss, and the series is tied 1-1 heading to Raleigh. Game 3, the first ever Stanley Cup game in Carolina. Our hero and his boys get a hero's welcome. And it's another tight competitive game, and the Canes are giving the stacked Wings a lot to handle. And tied 1-1 in the third period. Ron breaks out with O'Neill. He gets it to him. O'Neill scores. Yes, the Canes lead 2-1. It looks like they're about to take it as time winds down, but with 1:14 left, Brett Hull scores and we're up to overtime. Despite the groans of Hurricanes fans for that late goal, they have faith. As again, Carolina has been amazing in the extra frame in these playoffs with a 7-1 overtime record in the 8 games that have gone to the extra frame. The fans are on the edge of their seat. The first OT solves nothing. The second OT, nothing. The third OT is winding down at 5:13 left in triple overtime. Igor Larionov silences the Raleigh crowd. The Wings take a 2-1 series lead. Game 4, the Hurricanes fans still have faith. All 3 games have been very close. Our hero is trying with all his might, but that grinder line has his number. Hasek only faces 17 shots and he stops them all. The Red Wings win 3-0. Carolina's season is on the verge of ending. Game 5, back at the Joe. It's another tight affair, but the Canes season is one period away from ending as they trail 2-1 going into the third. Our hero is playing with every fiber of his being, but with 45 seconds left, Shanny hits an empty netter. The Wings win the Stanley Cup. Ron Francis played with all his heart, soul, blood, sweat, tears, and beyond. His overtime goal in Game 1 was a great moment and memorable for Carolina fans and himself, but it was just a matter of this Wings team being too damn good in the end. Ron, however, has nothing to be ashamed of, and neither does this Hurricanes team. This journey was one to behold. For a team that only had their core fans had faith in, and while they didn't obtain the Holy Grail, the belief was that it could happen one day. It was definitely a huge step in the right direction. This playoff run cemented Ron's legacy in Raleigh and has forever been loved by Hurricanes fans because of it. His 6 goals and 10 assists for 16 points were tied for 8th best in the playoffs, but it was much more than his stats that got the Hurricanes there. His 21st season, one of the best of his career, 27 goals, 50 assists for 77 points in 80 games. That top line of Francis, Kapanen, and O'Neill was on fire. Sammy assists on all but 10 of Ron's goals, 17 assists total. Francis returned the favor, assisting on nearly half of Sammy's 27 goals, and they teamed up with one way or another for 39 goals. Francis assisted on 18 of 31 Jeff O'Neill goals, and the two collaborated on 11 assists together. In total, overall, team up for 39 goals as well. Ron also had great chemistry with Merrick Malik and Bates Battaglia. For the 12th time in his 21-season career, Ron Francis is among the top 10 leaders in assists in a 4-way tie with Nick Lidstrom, Marcus Naslund, and Josef Stumpel, each with 50 on the year. The 3rd straight year reaching the 50 assist mark. And look at this! For the first time since he departed Pittsburgh, and the 5th time in his career, Ron Francis' 77 points allowed him to make the top 10, tied for 9th with fellow star center Mike Modano. He's listed as 7 out of 10 Hall of Famers even in 2002, and you can actually make an argument for Naslund in my opinion. And Ron Francis was awarded the King Clancy Memorial Trophy for the very first time, an award that was introduced in 1988, which was given to the man who exemplifies leadership on and off the ice and is recognized for their humanitarianism. An award many felt Ron was long overdue for, and this was awarded for his contributions to the Duke Children's Hospital in Durham, North Carolina. Ron has always worked well with charities involving sick children since his days in Hartford as well as Pittsburgh. And also, Francis becomes the 7th player in NHL history to win the Lady Byng Trophy for a 3rd time. It's definitely well-deserved after the year he had, which is one of the best of his entire career. If you look at all in the grand, big picture, what a glorious moment for our hero, proving he is a classy ambassador to the game he so loves. And wow, look at this! 6th place in Hart Trophy voting with 48 votes, his best showing for this award in the 4 times he's gotten votes. The first time he's received any since 1998. Some say he should have been a finalist, and I would agree, but the fact that he was finally recognized a little bit more than he usually is says a lot. Ron Francis is truly just an ageless wonder at this point, with one of the best all-around seasons again of his career. Tied for 4th in assists, the 12th time he has made the top 10, tied for 9th in league scoring, the 5th time in his career he's made the top 10 in league scoring, his 3rd Lady Byng Trophy for excellence in sportsmanship, also winning the King Clancy Trophy for his charitable work and leadership, and had his best showing for league MVP voting that he ever had in all his 21 seasons. And he won more team awards, including the Steve Chasson Memorial Award for Determination and Dedication, voted by his teammates, and he was voted MVP, team MVP that is, by sports writers. And of course, led the Hurricanes to the Stanley Cup Final for the very first time. What a run. This season made Ron Francis an icon in Raleigh and forever revered. Now approaching 40 years old in the 2002-03 season, Ron Francis' dedication to his team and the game of professional hockey was as strong as it ever was, even back when he first entered the league. For Ron, age really was just a number, and his goal to get the Hurricanes to the top left him more determined than ever. He was showing no signs of slowing down, but changes were starting to come in Carolina. After all, they would lose Martin Gelinas going into the season, and things weren't going to be as easy as we soon would see. Ron looked solid with 7 points in the first 11 games of the season in October, but the Canes struggled to find consistency. In November, they looked pretty good, while Ron had 10 points in 14 games, but December was not a very good month. While Hero's numbers weren't bad, the team itself was faltering. He had 11 points in 13 games. It didn't help that Kapanen was struggling big time this year, and Brindamore would miss 34 games in the season. Ron did have 2 goals in a December 12th win over the Flames. January was abysmal. 5 goals, 3 assists for 8 points in 15 games, and was a terrible -11. The Hurricanes won 2 games all month to boot. Ron's numbers improved in February with 7 assists in 11 games and was a mere -1, but the Hurricanes were just a plain mess and Kapanen was actually traded. In the final stretch of the season, Ron tried with all his might to get the Canes into a playoff position. It didn't happen. From March into the 3 games in April and 18 games, he had 14 points and did indeed reach the 20-goal mark for the 20th time in his career, but the team just fell apart completely and didn't have the fight they had the year prior. They even gave up the likes of Bates Battaglia, who, to be fair, was actually not having a very good season either, and also veteran defenseman Glenn Wesley was sent to Toronto. He had been with the team since Hartford in 1994. Fans did not like that move, but the Hurricanes finished 22, 43, 11, and 6, a horrendous 61 points, 30 less than the year prior, dead last in the entire conference. A huge fall, to say the least. Ron's 22nd season was a far cry from last year, but it isn't all on him either way. He notched 22 goals and 35 assists for 57 points, playing in all 82 games, and it was the Ron Francis Jeff O'Neill show as Kapanen disappeared off the score sheet and was sent to Philadelphia. O'Neill assisted on 15 of Ron's goals, all but 7. Meanwhile, Ron also returned the favor, assisting on more than half of Jeff's 31 goals with 17. They collaborated on 7 assists together, bringing the total of working together on 39 goals again this year. But the Hurricanes went from having the 13th most goals in the league the year prior out of 30 teams to dead last. Ron did get some votes again for the Lady Byng Trophy, coming in 8th place with 72 votes. And Ron did register a vote for the Selke Trophy, which oddly enough he did not even obtain a single vote the year prior. Either way, this is Ron's 11th time being involved in Selke Trophy voting. Yeah, wasn't a great season, but there were several circumstances as to why, and they didn't all fall on our hero. Regardless, he was named Team MVP once again, showing his value to the team was still immense. However, he and O'Neill were carrying the load, it seemed, more than they should have. On the dubious side of things, of course, Ron was a -22, the 3rd worst total of his career, but this team was definitely on par with many of the lowly Whalers clubs that he played for early in his career as well. It was only the 6th time in 22 seasons our hero has missed the playoffs, and the fact that he still garnered many Lady Byng votes says something, and at 40 years old reaches 20 goals for the 20th time shows the model of consistency that has made him one of the best. But he still isn't quite finished. Ron Francis is now entering his 23rd season in the NHL. He's 40 years old, but he's in great shape. He's done it all. He's even among the top elite in numbers. He has 1,222 career assists at this point. That's second all-time to Wayne Gretzky. Also at this point, his 1,651 games played was 3rd all-time going into this season, behind Mark Messier, who is also still active in the NHL. The all-time leader is Gordie Howe. And his 1,758 points, 5th all-time in the NHL. Ron has Stanley Cups, won a lot of team awards everywhere he played, some individual honors as well throughout the league. But he certainly didn't want to leave things where they ended last season. He believed in this Hurricanes club, and again they believed in him. Ron was ready to make one more go of it. Glenn Wesley had returned to the club after his short stint in Toronto. Also, a young prospect of the Hurricanes put a lot of hope in, a rookie by the name of Eric Stahl, has now arrived. But the Hurricanes are still lacking any real offense, and Ron just had a goal and a helper for 2 points in the first 9 games in October. He only had 3 goals and an assist for 4 points in 15 games in November. However, Ron was only averaging 13 minutes and 44 seconds of ice time a game. His role had definitely been diminished. Some saw it as making a way for the younger crop. Others saw it as Paul Maurice, the head coach, feeling Ron was now too old to be at the top of his game, much like he was just a mere 2 seasons prior. But perhaps they realized they made a mistake, because Ron played better in December with 7 points in 13 games. It was even 0 on the plus-minus side, and also that month Paul Maurice was fired. After December 14th, after 9 seasons of being the team's head coach, a move that actually shocked quite a few people, Rutherford, however, felt he lost control of the job. Peter Laviolette took over, and Ron was still contributing in January with 10 points in 14 games. The Hurricanes still weren't showing much in the way of improvement, however. Ron was playing fine in a primarily defensive role in February, with 3 goals, 2 assists for 5 points in 11 games and a +2, and the Hurricanes were showing slight improvements. On March 8, 2004, the Carolina Hurricanes faced the Columbus Blue Jackets on the road. On a power play in the first period, rookie Eric Stahl and Ron Francis set up Aaron Ward on a power play to open the scoring in the game. They went on to win it 4-1. It was Ronnie Franchise's last game as a Carolina Hurricane. At the trade deadline on March 9, 2004, Ron Francis was traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for a 4th-round draft pick in 2005. Rutherford had a new plan, and he was starting it now. He wanted to build for this team's future, and Ron was going to the team he actually grew up watching. Fans in Raleigh were not happy with seeing their hero depart. Ron was excited, however, at the prospect as his formidable Leafs team was headed towards the playoffs and wanted to add more depth for when that time arrives. Ron's final season in Carolina saw him score 10 goals and 20 assists for an even 30 points in 68 games. Again, it was he and Jeff O'Neill working together, as 13 of Ron's 30 points involved him, nearly half. He also worked well with Josef Isichik, as well as Eric Stahl when shifted with him, and had a big hand in mentoring him in his rookie season. He also clicked with Sean Hill on defense. Some say it was his ice time being cut early in the season that was the factor. Some say it was the fact that he and Jeff O'Neill didn't have a strong line mate. Others say it was simply Rutherford building for the future, and the fact that Ron's contract was coming up. I mean, it could be a combination of all those things, but it still showed that Ron's name held water, that other teams still wanted him, including a team such as the Maple Leafs. And now he gets to don the jersey he watched so many, such as Dave Keon, Daryl Sittler, and Lanny McDonald wear on his TV back in Sault Ste. Marie. But either way, to this day, he is the biggest icon in Carolina Hurricanes history. After 6 seasons in Carolina, Ron has so much to be proud of. He returned to the former Whalers franchise who crumpled in a heap once he left, and again became the savior. He took his leadership role very seriously, played with that trademark warrior spirit and animal heart with fearlessness, tenacity, and the hardest work ethic ever known. He mentored young players. He clicked well with the veterans. He attained his 3rd Lady Byng Trophy, his first Clancy Award, recognizing just how important he was to the community, and he won the team MVP twice and was voted by his teammates as the recipient of the Steve Chasson Memorial Award. The type of team awards that he won at Hartford and Pittsburgh, no less, he was still winning at Carolina. And after leading the team to their first division title in 12 years in 1999, he led them to 3 straight winning seasons, winning records that is, for the first time ever. And what he'll be best remembered for, that infamous 2002 run to the Stanley Cup Finals, that incredible 01-02 season that he had, being one of the finest of his career. And while Ron may not have gotten the cup, he accomplished more than even some of his biggest boosters could imagine he would have with his franchise. 118 goals, 236 assists for 354 points in 472 games. Not bad for a seasoned veteran pushing 40 in a dead puck era. That brings Ron Francis' time in Carolina, however, to a close. And aging like a fine wine, he gave that city a lot and it was recognized. But the Hurricanes had a bright future ahead, whereas Ron's career also still had some time left. A dream of many kids who grew up in Ontario and across Canada was coming true for Ron Francis, and indeed adding a man with playoff depth is beneficial to a team late in this season. However, this is also a habit for the Leafs, acquiring seasoned vets who do have playoff experience in hopes of that extra playoff edge, and it does not always seem to work. Ron was joining a Leafs team coached by the great Pat Quinn, and I talked about them, of course, a bit during the Canes playoff series against them in 2002 in the Eastern Conference Final. They still hadn't reached that next step. They were still led by 14-year veteran Matt Sundin, who was still among the best in the league. Also, Ron would be reunited with former Hurricanes teammate Gary Roberts, and also another veteran, Joe Newendike. One of the best two-way players in the game was now a Leaf, bringing 3 Stanley Cup rings with him. Veteran Owen Nolan also joined the club, while star forward Alex McGillney struggled with injuries all season. He also had hardworking fan favorite Darcy Tucker, and knuckle dragger Ty Domi was still on board. On defense, they were still led by Caberlet and McCabe, and they also acquired 16-year veteran Brian Leach, who was still productive, but it's all part of a pattern it seems, and for one, Leach hasn't played a playoff game in 7 years. Oh, and an aging, banged-up 17-year veteran Kelly Johansson joined the team, and then the biggest change was in goal. Cujo was gone, but Eddie the Eagle Belfour, who Ron faced in the 1992 Stanley Cup Final, who was gone to be one of the all-time greats in net, was now backstopping the Leafs in net, and he too now had a Stanley Cup ring on his finger, and he was still at the top of his game. The Leafs were 38-29-2 when Ron joined them, and still a contender. What can our hero do in Toronto? Ron would, however, take a lesser role in the Toronto team's stack such as this, with minimal ice time, but he was still able to produce 3 goals, 7 assists for 10 points, and was a +3 in the remaining 12 games of the season, as the Leafs would outstayed the course, going 7-4-1 after Ron's arrival. On April 3, 2004, in the 1731st game of his career, the final regular season game of the season, the Leafs sent a statement to the Ottawa Senators in a big 6-0 win. A huge win, meaning the Leafs take 4th place in the East from the Sens and crush them, doing it on the Senators' home ice to boot. This rivalry was very heated at this point. Ron was a huge part of this game. He had a goal, the 549th of his career, an assist, the 1249th of his career, and his 1798th point, just too shy of 1800. Only 3 players, Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, and Gordie Howe, had reached that milestone at this point. But the Leafs finished the year 45-24-10-3 for 103 points again, 4th in the East. And for the 17th time in his 23-season career, Ron Francis is headed to the postseason, and for the first time, doing so as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And indeed, they are facing the 5th place Ottawa Senators, who had 1 point less than the Leafs, with 102 on the season. The Battle of Ontario was about to commence, and despite what the media might try to tell you, it was nowhere near as epic as the Battle of Quebec. Oh, sure, some of these series are actually really good, but usually a battle involves two teams being successful at some point, or whatever. Anyway, the Senators were an immensely talented bunch and were led by 3 superstar wingers, team captain Daniel Alfredson, the team's top scorer Marian Hossa, and Martin Havlat. Also a trio centerman, up-and-comer Jason Spezza, hard-working Brian Smolinski, and one of the coolest names ever in hockey, Radek Bonk. They are also a huge part of this team's emergence. They had character players such as Todd White and Peter Schaefer, had acquired a former nemesis of Ron's, veteran winger and former Capitals all-star Peter Bondra. They had top-notch defensive core. The big man, Zdeno Chara, Wade Redden, and Chris Phillips all had tremendous seasons. Also, they had veteran Curtis Leschyshyn on the team, and in net, a former Penguins teammate of Ron's, Patrick Lalime. So here we go. Game 1, ACC in Toronto. The game was tied 1-1 in the first, and on the power play, Ron anchors it indeed. He sees an open Brian Leach, who gets to McCabe, who slaps it home. The Leafs lead 2-1. However, Hossa has the Leafs number on this night, with 2 goals in the Sens take the first game 4-2. Game 2, our hero wins some key faceoffs against Spezza, but it's Gary Roberts' 2 goals and Belfour's 31 save shutout that was the story of this night. The Leafs win 2-0. This series is tied, headed to the nation's capital. Game 3, the Corral Center is rocking, and after a scoreless first, it's the veteran duo Ronnie to Newendike. He scores 1-0 Leafs. It's another 2-0 win, the 37 save shutout for Belfour this time. The Leafs are rolling, and they have a 2-1 series lead. Game 4, the rivalry is heating up and the tension was rising, but it was the Sens who took it 4-1. The series is tied 2-2 going back to Toronto. Game 5, our hero has the numbers of the Sens defensively. It's another 2-0 win, Belfour's 3rd shutout of the series. The Leafs have the Sens against the wall. Game 6 in Ottawa is a very exciting affair and much more disciplined game from both clubs. It's a 1-1 tie at the end of regulation, but Mike Fisher, Mr. Carey Underwood, scores, and the Sens have forced Game 7. Game 7, the ACC is ready, and so is our hero. Playing his defensive game to a T, and the Leafs win 4-1 on the strength of 2 Joe Nieuwendyk goals. The Leafs are headed to the next round. Ron did well in his role and was a big part of the Leafs checking core. His 2 assists certainly didn't hurt, and now he's won his 17th playoff series of his career. Awaiting the Leafs and our hero the next round, a tough Philadelphia Flyers squad, as Ron is about to play the 31st playoff series of his career. The Flyers won their division with 101 points, and this team was stacked to the gills, to say the least. They were led by Ron's former Penguins teammate Mark Recchi, who had one of the best seasons of his 15-year career. Also, he had the highly skilled Michael Handzus, veteran All-Star John LeClair, and former Blackhawk star Tony Amani. And speaking of former Hawk stars, Jeremy Roenick is now a big part of this team, while youngster Simon Gagne continues to emerge. Also, someone Ron is very familiar with, Sami Kapanen, still on the Flyers here. Also, consistent 20-goal scorer Alexei Zhamnov was added to the club. On defense, they were top-notch. They had Kim Janssen, Marcus Ragnarsson, and veteran Vladimir Malakhov leading the way. And their starting goaltender is the talented Robert Esch. So, here we go. Game 1, it's the Wachovia Center in Philly. Our hero is having trouble with the star Flyers centers, and it's a tight game, but Philly takes it 3-1. Game 2, Ron was playing with a lot of spirit, but the Flyers again win, this time 2-1, and take a 2-0 series lead, headed to Toronto. Game 3, it's a dire situation at the ACC, and the Leafs took an early 2-0 lead, and Ron gives it to Domi to Kilger, who scores 3-0 Leafs en route to a big 4-1 win. Ron is playing like he wanted it. It's on display again. Game 4. 2 goals from Sundin. Another sensational performance from Belfort gives the Leafs a 3-1 lead. The series is 3-1 win. The series is tied 2-2. Game 5 back in Philly. The 171st playoff game of Ron Francis' career, but it doesn't look good as the Leafs trail 3-0 in the first period. But on a power play, Captain Ron steers the ship one more time. He sees Caberlet at the blue line and sets up for Nieuwendyk to score. The Leafs are on the board. It's Ron's 143rd playoff point of his career. The Leafs drop a very devastating and humiliating 7-2 loss and are against the wall. However, Ron also suffered an injury that was never fully disclosed to the media. He does not play in Game 6, and in a game that goes overtime, the hated Jeremy Roenick sticks it to the Leaf fans at the ACC, and their season is over. Ron did all he could, but his Flyers team was simply better. He still notched 2 assists and fought with all his might, but it sadly was not enough this time. The Flyers, however, would lose the Eastern Conference Final to eventual Cup champions, Tampa Bay Lightning. Ron had 3 goals, 7 assists for 10 points in his 12 games with the Maple Leafs, and it was the veterans who were his pals during this time. Calle Johansson, who despite seeing limited time, assisted on 2 out of 3 of Ron's goals. Meanwhile, Owen Nolan was hit with 2 assists from Ron for 2 of his goals. And Brian Leach teamed up with Ron for 2 assists. Sadly, however, most of the players involved, even including our hero, were short-term solutions to long-term issues that would soon arise in Toronto. And indeed, Ron's short time in Toronto allowed the young boy from the suit to live out a childhood dream, and he was key defensively and on the checking core in the opening round and win over Ottawa, but it seemed he knew his time was coming up. For the 11th time in his career, which includes his 3 wins, Ron received votes for the Lady Byng Trophy, coming in 10th place with a very impressive 100 votes. So, Ron's 23rd season comes to an end. He still showed he had substance to offer, even if it wasn't what we're used to seeing. Still, he made his 17th playoff appearance after 6 seasons in Carolina, finished the season with 12 games in Toronto. He had 13 goals and 27 assists for 40 points in 80 games, and came in 10th place in Lady Byng Trophy voting and was a key element in the Battle of Ontario. He was dearly missed by Hurricanes fans as they did not make the playoffs, but Ron may not have known it at the time, but he has already set them on a road to somewhere better. His time in Toronto wasn't long, but it wasn't a complete waste. Either way, he would not be back with this team. Ron Francis hadn't made any decisions or announced any publicly going into the 2004-05 season, which is actually kind of good because there was no 2004-05 season due to the lockout that canceled the entire year. As the settlement was reached and the 2005-06 season was about to commence, however, Ron was still technically a free agent. He hadn't re-signed with Toronto. There were even some rumors flying around he might go back to Carolina to finish his career for one more year. However, on September 14, 2005, Ron Francis made the official announcement he was retiring from the game of hockey at the age of 42. On January 28, 2006, the Carolina Hurricanes bestowed a huge honor on our hero, retiring the number 10, lifting it to the Raptors, acknowledging fully what he meant to the city and to the organization. Many of his former teammates were there to see it happen, and something big happened that year in Carolina. After acquiring a group of seasoned veterans and building younger talent, the Carolina Hurricanes won the Stanley Cup in 2006. They continued the path our hero set them on, and it culminated with the big prize. In the fall of 2007, in his first year of eligibility, Ron Francis, who had never craved the spotlight or got the recognition many of his peers did throughout the years, had the spotlight on him at long last. He was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Also, in 2017, Ron Francis was named one of the 100 greatest players in NHL history. Not bad for a guy who barely got noticed, eh? Shortly after the Carolina Hurricanes won their first Stanley Cup, 3 years later, the Pittsburgh Penguins won their first Stanley Cup since Ron had departed the team. However, during this time, Ron was now working in the Hurricanes front office. He took a job with the club, holding titles such as Director of Player Development, Director of Player Personnel. He's also an Assistant General Manager and Associate Coach, Director of Hockey Operations, Executive Vice President of Hockey Operations, and in 2014 became the team's General Manager. Unfortunately, the Hurricanes were not in good shape, and while he did draft such players as Noah Hanifin and Sebastian Aho, I don't know, Ron seemed out of his element. He was relieved of his duties in March of 2018 after a 20-year association with the club. However, when he then took position of the general manager of the expansion Seattle Kraken, who played their first season in 2021-2022. As the recording of this video, the Kraken are in their second season and have reached 40 wins, and could very well clinch the playoffs here in 2023. Ron seemingly learned a lot from his time in Carolina, and now is in control of a team full of promise, has made some key moves. As of April 2023, Ron is 5th all-time in games played in the NHL, and former teammate Jaromir Jagr has played 2 more than him. Also, as of this video, Ron is 2nd all-time in April 2023 in assists, and likely will be for the foreseeable future. As of this video, the active leader is Sidney Crosby with close to 950. Only the great Wayne Gretzky has more than our hero. And to top it off, he was only just 2 points shy of reaching 1,800 of his career with 1,798. That still leaves him 5th all time. And look at this elite company he is in again. Wow. Again, he'll be here for a while, as active leaders are Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin are both closing in on 1,500 points. He did it without endorsements. He did it without a whole lot of fuss from other than where he played. But wherever he played, be it a small market team struggling to get somewhere, a big time team stacked with stars winning championships, or helping a rising club get to a level they'd never been before, Ron Francis, before many truly realized it, worked his tail off, provided leadership, had one of the best and hardest work ethic of any NHL player in history. Ignored, snubbed for awards, but he didn't care about being a, quote, league-wide superstar. Yet, he ended up 2nd all-time assist leader, one of the all-time points leaders, the first player to score 500 goals without even scoring 40 in a season. He led the NHL in assists twice, was in the top 10 12 times in 23 seasons. He even made the top 10 in scoring 5 times. He even led the league in plus-minus once, took home the Clancy Trophy as philanthropy, and led the Whalers to their first division title, led the Hurricanes to their first division title after the move, was team captain for 3 of the 4 teams he played for, with the exception of the 12 games he played in Toronto, spending a total of 13 of 23 seasons wearing the C on his jersey, a title he took very seriously. He was selected for 5 NHL All-Star games, playing in 4. And when it came to team awards, he won a total of 16 in Hartford, 8 in Pittsburgh, and 3 in Carolina, totaling 27 team awards. He reached 20 goals 20 times, averaged at least a point a game 15 times. Despite being either snubbed, turning down, or even at one point being injured for international competition, he still got himself a silver medal in the 1985 World Championships. Not to mention also 3 Lady Byng trophies, also the Selke Trophy as Best Defensive Forward. This number has been retired by the Hurricanes. He's in the Penguins' Ring of Honor yet. He's not in their Hall of Fame, but Samuelson is. And of course, part of that infamous 17-game win streak, the President's Trophy winning Penguins team of 92-93, leading the Hurricanes to their first finals appearance, setting them on a path, and, of course, 2 Stanley Cup rings. His play in 1992, especially in that Rangers series, was truly historic. And the cherries on the sundae, named one of the 100 greatest players of all time, and an honored member of the Hockey Hall of Fame. But to emphasize Ron's career, what he did was he brought out the best in his teammates, and in turn, it brought out the best in him. He was truly a portrait of teamwork. That concludes our 4-part series on the great Ronnie franchise, Captain Ron Francis. What other hockey players would you like to see us cover on this channel? Leave us just in the comments below, and in the meantime, like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'll see ya!